is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got
Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's Thursday and time to roll up our sleeves and get back to work. Hope you had a good rest overnight. Lots of work to be done. Glad to have you on board. Appreciate having you here. So much to talk about and so many things to cover today. But the big story today is the brand new budget released by the Snyder administration here for the state of Michigan, somewhere near $55 billion. In the proposal, the governor calls for $195 million in new spending for the problems in Flint and the water system there, $195 million additional dollars. And that means that the total is somewhere near $250 million. It's big money. We'll get to that in just a second. In fact, the governor will be joining me here on the program for about a half an hour, coming up a little bit later. So we're going to talk about this budget that he's put together and put forth. We're going to talk about the ongoing problems in Flint. We're going to talk about the calls for his resignation as people are pushing for him to step down in the wake of this crisis. We'll talk about that. Also today on the program, we'll have Michael Daugherty from Cyber Defense Magazine. We'll talk about the $19 billion for cybersecurity the president has put in his new budget. We'll have Congressman Tim Walberg here. We'll have some political strategists talking about South Carolina and what's going to happen next. And Unhyphenated America's Christopher Harris will be here, talking about Beyonce's Black Lives Matter dance routine at the Super Bowl and why people are so outraged at that Cool Doritos commercial where the fetus is bouncing around and then decides it's, well, time to come early when the Dorito gets thrown across the room. Apparently people are angry that somebody dared humanize a fetus. I mean, how dare anybody make a fetus look like a person? What are they thinking? All right, so the budget here. Governor Rick Snyder entered the House Appropriations room with his new budget. It's $54.9 billion, up 0.8% over the previous year. So that's not much of an increase. In fact, I'd say that's pretty flat. It includes just over $10.2 billion in the general fund. But the big news in this budget that'll have you talking, that we'll be talking about here today with the governor and going forward, is $195 million proposed by the governor in additional money to address the problems with the water in Flint. Now, that amount would break down over 2016 and 2017, the fiscal years more accurately, and would bring the total now from state government to $232 million. And the money's spent something like this. $37 million go to making the water safe to drink. All right. Food and nutrition, that accounts for $15 million. Physical, social, and educational well-being is $63 million. Water bill relief, i.e. free water bills for everybody, $30 million. I'm not sure how much the water bills in Flint, but apparently they're pretty steep. And then $50 million in reserve. Snyder basically saying as the situation evolves and moves forward, the state will have a better idea about having to spend extra money. It seems like an exorbitant amount of money to me. I mean, I was reading here just in the last week or two that it would cost $60 million to replace all of the piping, all of it, every bit of it in Flint would cost $60 million. All right, and then you monitor these kids that end up with high blood levels. But I'm going to need an update on the number. The last time I heard the number was just over 100 kids who had tested for high lead levels. We need an explanation of exactly where that number is now. Meanwhile, of course, you've got Attorney General Bill Schuette hiring an outside investigator and an independent prosecutor to keep it all on the, to keep it clean. My sources tell me this investigator is a butt kicker, former FBI guy who's a no-nonsense, get to the facts, not screwing around with it. Also been told that several people, including people like the former head of the DEQ, have been told they need to find their own attorneys. So they're on their own. We know the laws were we know that laws were broken. That's pretty safe assumption at this point. The question is at what level? From my reading of the statutes, the violation of the laws came at the local level, for sure, when the water was switched over and there was no anti-corrosion agent in the water and no written plan to deal with it. That means that there was a problem there to begin with. Now, as the governor was laying out his budget, again, it's basically $55 billion. Protesters in the hall saying it's time for him to go, of course. And there's a lot more in this budget than just the things I've talked about, but that's what's going to get the conversation. There's also $72 million per year from the Tobacco Settlement Fund toward Detroit public schools for a total of $720 million. That's a highlight in this document. Education funding increases between $60 and $120 per pupil, which adds up to $150 million statewide. Just over $61 million to restore university funding to 2011 levels. $165 billion to be set aside for statewide infrastructure needs. $1.5 million for more police in Benton Harbor, Muskegon Heights, Harper Woods, Highland Park, and Hamtramck and Inkster. $9.5 million for additional Michigan State Police troopers and $8.5 million for additional corrections officers. $25 million to expand the Healthy Kids Dental Program to cover every eligible child in the state with dental coverage. And $135 million for specialty drugs to treat hepatitis C and cystic fibrosis in Medicaid patients. So what do you think about this budget? What do you think about $250 million being set aside, taxpayer dollars, to fix the problems in Flint? That's a pile of money for you to consider there. Now, the hotline number, where would you spend the money? Where would you trim? 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Get out your pen and paper. It's time to do the budget here on the Steve Gruber Show.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
All right, welcome back to it. Let's jump to the hotline here. By the way, that hotline number, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966, the number to call if you want to get involved. Keith is on the line in Flint. Keith, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for taking my call. They were calling for Snyder's resignation because of this water deal. I don't really see his culpability, but it does now sound like he's trying to absolve himself by spending taxpayer money, allowing the state to get shaken down and spend money where it doesn't really apply to what is required to fix this lead problem.
Well, there's another thing you might not be. Hold on, there's something else you might not be considering there. And you're right. Sir. You're right in your idea there, because that's one of my thoughts. I mean, is he just trying to spend his way to, buy his way out of it, if you will? In a way, that might be true, because you don't know what the backroom conversations are with attorneys saying, "Listen, to stave off, a flood of attorneys parading in here, the Jeffrey Feigers of the world carrying their battle flag in there and claiming, the state owes them billions of dollars." They might be having conversations behind closed doors saying this is the way to defend against lawsuits. So that's one possibility, Keith, and I think it's a strong one.
That is an excellent point, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. That's why I like listening to you, Steve. But I think we still need to tread carefully how we go about resolving this situation. But I appreciate that point you brought up, and I will get off the line and continue to listen, sir.
Keith, I greatly appreciate your input. You see, here's the problem. You've got all this politics that's muddled this whole conversation, and not muddled it. The bomb throwers showed up, the Al Sharptons, the Michael Moores showed up with their vitriol and their venomous rhetoric, their hateful rhetoric. You know what's sad about it, really, is that folks on and this goes both ways, but this is an easy, observation for this particular case. The Democrats, people like Michael Moore, actually pray that this is true, that Governor Rick Snyder is such an evil individual that he would actually target black children in Flint and poison them intentionally and then turn his back. Because that's what you would have to believe. That's what you would have to believe to go forward on this point of view. Now, I had a long conversation yesterday with a listener, Antonio, from the Lansing area. And he's a guy who doesn't agree with me on a lot of things here. And in fact, he at first in our conversation, this is on social media, on Facebook, at first he said, well, you're a bigot and this, that. And then I explained my position. I said, no, let me explain some things to you. Here's what I've read. Here's what I understand to be true. I understand that the Flint Water Department was the first place that a mistake was made. Incompetence at their level, and I've said this for a long time, incompetence at the local level followed by indifference at the state and federal level, because the people of the state did not react in a timely fashion. They did not do what they needed to do to turn the problem around and head it off at the pass and lessen its impact. But the problem started locally. And Flint didn't do anything wrong to begin with, per se, by saying we want to go to a different water source. In fact, that was probably a smart thing to do overall. And it didn't have anything to do with the emergency manager. He didn't approve the vote of 7-1 by City Council in Flint until 7 months after the fact. So let's get some things straight. Let's make sure we're operating with facts and not emotion when we talk about these things. Now, as far as the governor putting out $250 million, I don't know. I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later today on the program. So make sure you tune in and tell your friends that the governor will be here with me for a half an hour to talk about these things. I don't normally get him for that long, but I begged and pleaded with Sarah, and she said, I'll make it happen. And, the governor was gracious enough to give me that time. Now, if you dislike Rick Snyder, that's fine. If you're not a big fan of Rick Snyder, that's fine. But, hey, let's be fair about the conversation. Let's have a conversation about what's true, what's not true, why we're spending this kind of money, why Rick Snyder feels compelled to do this. What did he know? When did he know it? He's released all of these emails, of course. He's been more forthcoming than any politician I'm aware of in the last 20 years. How many politicians do you know just voluntarily open up their emails? Think about that for a second. Voluntarily open up their emails for perusal. Something to consider. Anyhow, and like I said, he will be here a little bit later. Before I get too far down the road here, let's also mention that Carly Fiorina is out of the race. Chris Christie is out of the race to become president. The Democrats, the liberals, doing two things right now. Two things without question. They're panicking over Bernie Sanders and they're panicking over Donald Trump. For Hillary Clinton, it was supposed to be nothing more than a coronation for the second time. And for the second time, she's running toward the football in a powder blue pantsuit, of course. So sure, so confident, so utterly shocked when the ball is yanked out of the way at the very last moment and she flies up to flop hard on her back. It is her Charlie Brown moment for sure. The gasp goes up from the crowd, and a deafening thud echoes when Hillary hits the ground. Embarrassed and demoralized, she slowly climbs to her feet, but it's all too familiar. An upstart, radically left-wing senator that wasn't supposed to put up much of a fight scores a huge win. This time it was a devastating 22-point rout in New Hampshire, the same place where Hillary coasted to victory in 2008, and her husband secured the title of comeback kid in 1992 when he finished second there. Yes, all too familiar, like the collapse of Hillary's campaign in front of a junior senator with almost no experience of anything. Back then, we were told, of course, that Barack Obama was a once-in-a-lifetime candidate. What are they saying now? Bernie Sanders isn't a once-in-a-lifetime guy. He's a 74-year-old curmudgeon, socialist from Vermont. You know, maybe the problem isn't Obama. Maybe the problem isn't Sanders. Maybe the problem is Hillary Clinton as a candidate. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders went to meet Al Sharpton yesterday to pander for the black vote. Bernie and the bomb thrower got together to pander for the black vote. I got an idea. Just have better ideas on how we're going to move America forward. Don't pander. Don't pander. It's the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right, welcome to it, my friends. Yeah, tell your friends, Governor Snyder will be here for 2 full segments. We actually get a chance to have a conversation today, which is not normal. Usually these guys are in such a hurry, we don't get much time. But today we do. We're going to talk the budget and, of course, the Flint water crisis. So tell your friends, gather around the radio, and take notes, of course. The same is true for our next guest. Take notes because you might learn something, and it's important for you to learn something. You know, if you trusted the left, or if you watched television or the movies or television news specifically, you'd have this notion that America is this wildly violent place, you know, the OK Corral every day at Walmart or some such nonsense. The chance of you being involved with a violent crime in America is less today than at any time in my lifetime. More people, more guns, more things going on, and yet less violent crime, just the way it is. Barry Latzer here, criminologist and author of The Rise and Fall of Violent Crime in America. Barry, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Well, first of all, you know, I've read a fair amount about this, so I'm going to make a couple of observations. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. From things that I've read, violent crime in the 1970s is when violent crime really hit a crescendo, if you will. And then I think gun violence and gun homicides reached their peak during the first term of Bill Clinton's presidency. And since that time, violent crime has been on a downward trajectory. Is that fair to say?
I would agree with everything, except I'm not as sure about the gun violence part. There's no question that violent crime in this country reached a crescendo. I like that word. It started in the late 1960s and went on through the early 80s, started to decline, and then for reasons we may get to in a bit, skyrocketed back up again in the late 80s, and that ended about 1993, 1994. And we have been in a crime trough ever since the mid-1990s.
And why? Okay, so there's some reasons for that in my estimation. First of all, America's getting older. You know, older people are less violent. You know, they might be grumpy, but, you know, a guy who might have been violent in his 20s is just, well, grumpy in his 60s, I suppose. Is that part of it? As we get older, as we age, there's less violence? Is it better policing? What do you think are some of the factors that are, you know, attributable here?
Absolutely. The demographics were a big factor. I would have said, though, that it was mainly the baby boomers aging, and for violent crime, the aging actually starts in the 30s, believe it or not. Violence is really a young guy's game, so you're absolutely right about that. So when did that aging out happen? It started actually in the 1980s, but then got interrupted because of the crack cocaine epidemic, which was carried on, by the way, by the next generation, the really young ones, the the late teens, early 20s cohort. And then the boomers kept aging and aged out of violent crime, and the combination of the end of the cocaine business, the toughened-up criminal justice system, and the aging out of the boomers, that turned the trick.
So we're a less violent place. I mean, and because of this program that I do right here, and I can assure you that the stats that I gave you about gun violence parallel the decrease in violence overall would stand to reason the gun violence also is diminishing, which it is. The biggest year for gun homicides was about 1992, 1993, and it's been declining ever since. Mm-hmm. And again, some of the same reasons. It's demographics. There's a decrease. There was an increase for a long time in strict enforcement, police enforcement. My question now is, where do we go? Because people still believe that America is this really violent place. America's not even in the top 10 for homicides and so forth per capita in the world. We're not a particularly violent place unless you go to specific areas and get involved with a couple of things: gangs and drugs. A lot of violence associated with those two factors. But out here in the rest of the world, people were, even in poor neighborhoods, if you're just going to school and working, the chance of you getting involved with violence, not particularly big.
I think that's correct for nowadays. As for the comparison between us and other countries, I would say this. When it comes to violent crime, the European countries are pretty much the same as us. Some of them have higher rates, some have lower rates. The big difference between us and them, though, is firearm homicides. They don't have as many firearm homicides as we do. And the interesting thing to me about the firearm homicides is that we focus really on the wrong cause. When we focus on homicides by people who are robbing us and people who are raping us, that's the wrong focus, because the numbers show, and I have the latest data from the FBI on this, the numbers show 3/4 of the homicides involve family members or intimates or acquaintances of the victim. So these are not strangers to the victim who come up and assault the victim. And you're right, the odds of that happening are pretty slim.
Well, let's dig a little bit deeper there, just so we're clear on this. There are about 32,000 gun deaths in America a year, 20,000 of which are suicides, or 21,000 are suicides, leaves you about 11,000 gun homicides. Of those, 75% are directly attributable to gangs and drugs. Now, they may be, they might know each other in passing, but they're gang and drug related. So that leaves about 2,200 total homicides in America, less than 5 a day in a country of 325 million. That would be considered a homicide, whether a husband kills a wife or a holdup where a stranger kills somebody. So the chance of you being involved with a gun homicide in America is almost nil.
Right. I wouldn't put suicides in the package, though. But you're right. Of course, if the heading is gun killings, then you have to put suicide in there too. But I would separate out homicides and suicides, which of course are self-inflicted.
Right. So if your stats are accurate and hold true, and I'm going to assume I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here, that leaves 2,200 homicides, and so 3/4 of those would be about 1,600 people that are known acquaintances, which leaves a total of 600 people that are the victim of random homicide in America annually. 600. Now, I'm not discounting the value of those 600 lives, but in a nation of 325 million people, the chance of you being murdered by somebody with a gun that you don't know is almost zero.
Right. I agree with that. I may not be with you on all the numbers, but I agree with the main point, and I think that's absolutely right. One other adjunct point to that, though, is this. Homicide is just kind of rare among crimes anyway, relatively speaking. The one we really feared during the late 60s and up to the early 90s, and the one that scares the public the most, and I think rightfully so, is robbery. Robbery is the stranger crime. And when robbery gets out of, way out of control, that's when you see the fear levels really climb.
Well, there you go. All right, can somebody find your book? Where do they find it?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual outlets. It's available everywhere now, I think.
The Rise and Fall of Violent Crime in America, written by Barry Latzer. Barry, thank you so much for joining us.
That was a pleasure, Steve. Thanks so much.
There you have it. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday. We'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show, American values with Midwestern common sense.
All right, 45 after on a Thursday. My next guest got up again this morning and said, "My God, I'm on Gruber's show. How did I get so damn lucky?" That's what Michael Daugherty said when he got out of bed this morning. He fell to his knees and said, "Thank you. I get to be on Gruber's show." Isn't that right, Daugherty?
Well, okay. I'm just thankful I'm out of New Hampshire.
Fair enough. Michael Daugherty here with us
last night, and I'm just so glad to be out of there.
So do you, you can't eat any more local New Hampshire food, too much chaos, you couldn't see another Bernie sign, hooray for socialism?
I'm telling you, all those Bernie people, there's just too many of them. I felt like I was at the Hash Bash in Ann Arbor in 1965. It was just unbelievable.
Except that guy still thinks it's 1965. There's your problem, you see.
Well, that was true. They're all sitting there 70 years old thinking they're still fighting Nixon. It's like, I'm like, it's over, but they're in their little echo chamber. It's actually kind of something to see, but, you see it, you're done.
You know what's sad, though, Michael, in all honesty, that you get all these people. Bernie Sanders, an avowed Democratic Socialist, and let me just stop right there. I'm sick and tired of arguing with people about what Democratic Socialism is. You guys have a thing on your computer called Google. For the love of God, use it, all right? And understand what Democratic... Well, that's not what it is. What he wants to do is this and this and this. No, Democratic Socialism, here's what it means. It means the means of production are controlled by the government, but we, the people, get to vote on how the government controls the things that we no longer own. Pretty simple stuff. That's not what it is. Oh, for Lord's sake.
As if that would even work. This is what cracks me up. I'm like, can we just talk about, is it even possible to work? We can talk theory all day long, but look at world history. But
world history.
In this echo chamber, there's no getting it. And the Hillary supporters are walking around a fog of denial. I mean, they're all, that crowd, I interviewed several Hillary supporters, and they pretty much are all people that have supported her for 2-3 decades, and they're just,
well, that would explain,
collective perception.
That explains why, she lost. And here's what I found stunning. In Iowa, she lost to people under 30 by about, Sanders got like 80% of the people under 30 in Iowa. But he got 70% of the people under 50 in New Hampshire. Good God. We've got people that are in their 40s that think Bernie and socialism and, the evil rich people are destroying the planet nonsense. It's baffling to me.
But the good news on that, if you want to look at the silver lining, is I suppose that delusion's better than the reality of a Clinton. If I had gotten in my head and I had to pick one.
Well played. Well, I'll give you that, yeah. Anyhow, so what do you think we're going from here? I just saw that Chris Christie's out, Carly Fiorina's out, the field's down to 5 viable candidates. Ben Carson hasn't dropped yet, but he should. And Governor Gilmore is still in, just in case you need a backup plan.
I had dinner with Governor Gilmore.
Where, in New Hampshire?
Yes, I did.
Well, that's because nobody else
went out for pizza.
Was that everybody that voted for him then? The 4 people that went out for pizza?
No, he's a very, very nice man.
I don't disagree.
Really,
but he had no chance on God's green earth of getting more than about the 4 votes you had for, at the dinner table.
I know. I don't. But such a kind guy. I don't know what he's trying to do, but. Anyway, I don't know if he's just having a good time. I'm not sure.
So let me ask you this: you had your finger on the pulse of the people there in New Hampshire, but New Hampshire's electorate is a lot different than Iowa, which is a hell of a lot different than South Carolina. So my question going into South Carolina, but Bernie was there. Bernie and the bomb thrower got together yesterday. Al Sharpton. In his, vile rhetoric, they got together to talk about the black vote.
This is when it's good. Yeah, that's warning, danger, Will Robinson. Things are going to get real dirty now.
Yeah, and so, but the Congressional Black Caucus apparently later today is going to give its endorsement to Hillary Clinton. We'll see how that comes about, but that's what I'm understanding. So here's my question going forward. 8 years ago, they said, well, it's a once-in-a-lifetime candidate, it's Barack Obama. Well, Bernie Sanders is no once-in-a-lifetime candidate. He's a 74-year-old curmudgeon who believes that, Karl Marx was a smart guy. So here we are. What do you see going forward? Can Bernie Sanders win in South Carolina? Can he win in Nevada? Can he pull off big wins on Super Tuesday?
I can't imagine it. I really can't. And you know what? As a Republican, I hope he does, because there's no way he's going to win. But there's just no way that this guy's going to win the general election.
Can Hillary Clinton win a general election right now, in your estimation?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Can Hillary Clinton win a general election? She can't beat a socialist in her own party.
No, the masses are. Well, I don't know. The masses are asses sometimes when it comes to Democrats and what they'll get behind and do. It depends on. She's so demoralizing. She doesn't really enjoy being out people. So I don't think so. But it depends on what goes on with the Republican stick. Because I have to say, I'm sitting here watching this Trump phenomenon, and I'm absolutely, utterly dumbfounded. When this guy uses the P word and no one cares. I don't know.
Do you use that word? Do you use that word?
Not if I was running for president publicly and knowing that I'm a role model for.
Wasn't my question.
Kids.
My question is: do you refer to have we become a bunch of America become a bunch of?
Not so much that word. I think more entitled.
No, we become weaklings.
Huh?
We become weaklings. I get where he's coming from. Would I use it on the campaign trail? No, probably not. But the problem is, Michael, that people identify with it. Go, he said what a lot of people are thinking.
I know.
Are we
I just get nervous because he's such a salesman. I don't know that if he's going to, once he is going to get into and actually know how to fix it within that system. I really get nervous about his effectiveness.
No, my nervousness is exactly what you said, but for a different reason. My concern is that Donald Trump becomes president and then finds an affection for executive orders because nobody can stop him, just like they have not been able to stop Barack Obama. I don't admire the abuse of the Constitution by anybody. I'll give you 15 seconds for the last word.
Well, we're at a turning point here. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to turn in the southern states, I think, and if people are going to get serious, or maybe I'm going to have to get serious about Donald Trump. I'm kind of stuck on Ted Cruz and the Constitution, but I guess most people don't understand the Constitution right now.
Or ever, for that matter. Michael Dougherty, always a pleasure.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it off.
Stop.
Got it in.
Yeah, stop. You're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, it's Thursday, my friends, and welcome to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show. If you'd like to get involved with the conversation, glad to have you on board at 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. You can find out more at the Steve Gruber Show Facebook page. In fact, today, if you want to go to the Steve Gruber Show Facebook page, post up your questions for the governor. I'll have him coming up here shortly. Governor Rick Snyder will be here on the program, and he's going to be with me for a couple of segments. We actually have a chance to get a conversation. So often, these guys are so busy. The men and women that are elected officials are so busy, they don't give us, or they don't want to stick around very long to get into a deep conversation. But in this case, we're going to. The governor released his budget yesterday, about $55 billion, less than 1% larger than the last fiscal year, so pretty much a similar budget. But in this budget, he is proposing a tremendous amount of additional money for Flint, $195 million more dollars, bringing the total to, I believe, $232 million. Which we're going to have to ask him about because there's a whole lot there that we need an explanation of why it's there, what it's being spent on, because in my reading, One of the things that I read over the course of this Flint, fiasco is that it would take $60 million to replace all of the water pipes in Flint that, that would need replacement, okay? $60 million. So how do we end up at 4 times that much? Now, I realize that there have been kids affected. I don't know the number. I'm going to have to ask the governor how many kids have tested for high lead levels in their blood to date. I think it's somewhere just over 100 from the last time I checked, all right? We're going to ask him about that and figure out why we need, $250 million, and maybe there's justification for it. Meanwhile, the mayor of Flint, Karen Weaver, was testifying before Congress here yesterday and said her city's democratic rights have been taken away because the governor appointed an emergency manager to that city. Go.
We are a people who have had our democratic rights taken away from us by emergency manager law that has been imposed on us in Michigan. Our elected officials have no power to govern themselves, and there's no accountability for what these managers do because they report only to the governor.
We need to keep in mind that we're going to be facing this issue for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I know we're talking a lot about funding and supports now, but 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, will those resources be secure for Flint?
I try to work with him because he is the governor, and that's what I have to do as an elected official. I have requested, and what we have talked about have been weekly meetings together. Now, as far as what they want to have happen, we've had enough of them telling us what's best for the city of Flint. And so that was why I put a plan forward. We cannot wait for them to make decisions about us and for us. We need to speak up and speak out on behalf of our own community. And so that's the posture, the stance that I have taken is I don't want them planning for us. I want the money. I want to help put the plan that we have come up with forward.
I want the money. In fairness, Madam Mayor, the city of Flint and its finances were mismanaged for decades. The city of Flint was bankrupt, as are many cities around the state and around the country. So what would you have us do, the taxpayers and the governor for that matter? Would you allow the city of Flint to continue to fritter away its resources, to squander the tax base of the citizens of the city of Flint? Or would you have somebody come in and say, let us get this under control? It seemed to work reasonably well by most estimations in the city of Detroit, has it not? So why would you fault the governor? Listen, it's not like the governor said, hey, let's go to Flint today and put in an emergency manager randomly. It's not how it works. I don't like the people of Flint, so I'm going to go over there. I'm just going to put in an emergency manager. I mean, come on. Let's be honest about this. I had a conversation yesterday, and I have these all the time, but this one struck me particularly. One of my listeners listens all the time, doesn't care for what I think particularly, but Antonio seemed like he was pretty angry with me to begin with. But we had a conversation back and forth, and it was about Flint, and it was about how this has evolved. And I get where he's coming from to some extent. Listen, he feels that maybe that people in Flint are overlooked, and he said, if this happened in Ann Arbor, where Governor Rick Snyder lives, do you think it would have taken this long for the administration to react? That's a fair point. Maybe not. But again, I go back to, let's start where the problem originated. And the problem originated in the city of Flint. When the city of Flint changed from the Detroit water supply to their temporary supply using the Flint River, which they've used for 100 years, the water was not treated as it has to be by federal law. It was in violation of federal law, period. And the city of Flint also did not have a written plan on how to address corrosiveness in their water, which has to be in place by federal law. Now, it is our responsibility as a state to help them correct the issues that have occurred. But how far does that go? Is it $250 million worth? How far does that go? And it's a serious question. And I'll entertain your phone calls at 888-900-9966. What is the responsibility? Because the problem is, if you give $250 million to Flint, what about Kalamazoo and Saginaw and Muskegon and Holland and Owasso and Adrian and Ionia? All of those cities that I just named have lead problems. Maybe not directly related to the water, but they have elevated lead levels in the people that live in those cities for a variety of environmental reasons, which is something else I'd like to ask. Is it directly attributable? The elevated lead levels in the people in Flint, is it directly attributable to just the water? Or are there other environmental factors in play here? My guess is it's an old industrialized city. There might be other factors in play, because if you look at the map, you'll find that on individual streets, there'll be one house that tested way over the actionable level, but houses right next door, nothing. So we have to look at the environment. We have to look at the whole thing in context. And here's where it has to. Here's where Antonio and I got. We had a conversation in the end. He stopped referring to me in derogatory terms, so I think we made a real stride there. But we had a conversation about how do you, okay, let's set the politics aside for a moment. I don't know if that's possible, because you've got Michael Moore, and you've got Al Sharpton, you've got Cher, and all of these people saying that, Rick Snyder is involved with racial genocide against the children of Flint. Do you really believe that? I mean, how can you, you would have to believe that Rick Snyder would intentionally target children, specifically children of color, for poisoning, and then just turn his back to save a few dollars. And if that's truly what you think, we have bigger problems in this country than I ever estimated previously. Consider that for a moment. Again, the governor will be joining me in a little bit. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
A boy's born in hot Mississippi, surrounded by four walls that ain't so pretty. His parents give him love and affection.
All right, welcome back to it.
Keep him strong, moving in the right direction.
Welcome back to it. I think I've seen the most ridiculous campaign ad ever. If you haven't seen this yet, go look it up. You owe it to yourself. There's this Ted Cruz ad put out where it has a Donald Trump action figure. It's like a little doll, and these kids are playing. With these dolls. And I'm not kidding you. It's bad. And then they have like this dollhouse there, right? And the Trump action figure starts breaking the dollhouse, and the doll flees. Eminent domain. The Trump action figure is cute. But a different way to go would have been, well, Trump says he can do anything. Trump says he can do anything. Well, what's he going to do? He says he can do anything. An action figure is just plastic and fake and make-believes. You see, you could have done something more effective in a campaign commercial than what they did. It's a strange commercial. Anyhow, so go find the Donald Trump action figure ad and go from there. Doug Sachtleben is here from the Club for Growth to talk more about the Donald Trump train and its big win in New Hampshire. Welcome back to the program, Doug.
Steve, thanks for having me back on.
So is the Club for Growth on board yet, or what?
No, we're still not fans. Still concerned that Trump will say anything to get elected.
So he's like every other politician.
Well, there's probably elements of that, but at least you've got a record for some of these guys, a voting record, legislative record of some kind. That doesn't mean that you have to have been a lawmaker to count. But at least when you've had to take votes or you've had to stand on things, then folks have a better sense of where you stand.
Well, people hate career politicians. That's the message. Now what?
They do, but I think if they look hard at how vehemently Trump has stood for taxes, donating to Dems, to bailouts, to single-payer health care, which he still seems to have this affinity for government-run health care, still seems to bring it up.
So did Teddy Roosevelt. So, Teddy Roosevelt had an affinity for single-payer health care. It's a Republican idea, has been for a very long time, because they believe, those Republicans that put it forth, believe it would save America money in the long run if it were done properly and not this gobbledygook that we currently have. Go on.
Yeah, I think the fundamental question comes back to people have had this, and you're right, it's been a gobbledygook is a fair term, but they've still seen what government does when it runs things and how ineffective government is. And the fact that you've got a government that often has this progressive liberal influence that's going to continue to move it toward more and more government-run bureaucracy. And I think people have come to the sense that this is not the way to do it, and that America emphasizes free markets and giving people choices, and that would apply to health care as well.
What is the Club for Growth going to do when Donald Trump gets nominated?
Yeah, we don't get involved in races where there's bad candidates. We get involved when there's a strong economic conservative. Maybe
see, the problem I have with that, Doug. Let me just jump in. Here's the problem I have with that. By saying things like that, and you're not the only gentleman that I encounter like this. Donald Trump's not conservative enough. He's done these things with Democrats. Single payer, he's said is okay in the past, so on and so forth. I'll tell you this: he may not be conservative enough for the Club for Growth or for a lot of other people. But I will guarantee you he is far more conservative than anybody running on the Democratic ticket. One who is an avowed socialist who would turn our, General Motors and mom and pop businesses over to the government to be run. And then you've got Hillary Clinton, who's trying very hard to be Bernie Sanders as far left as she can go as well. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you can say what you want. Well, Donald Trump's a radical. Have you seen who's in the White House?
Oh, sure, but you can line up his positions with a lot of Hillary's in a lot of cases. Now, you're right. If it comes down to it in the end, you still want to get a Republican in there, ideally, because I think philosophically it should present a better case. That doesn't mean that we're going to jump on board as fans suddenly of Donald Trump because he's really the worst candidate on the Republican side.
Worse that because I hear this, I hear a lot of people say that John Kasich should have run as a Democrat.
John Kasich seemed to indicate that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He made an offhand joke, is what he did, and like so many things, the media took it and turned it into something it wasn't. But the point being is, Ted Cruz, and I have a lot of friends of mine that are Ted Cruz supporters, and I like what Ted Cruz says and writes to a point, and I think he makes a lot of sense. I also don't believe that Ted Cruz is electable necessarily. I may be proven wrong. All right, in fairness, I may be proven wrong. But he is a harsh guy. And he's not warm and fuzzy at all. At least Trump makes people laugh sometimes. Trump, and complain as you may, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, but Trump brings Democrats to the table. He brings middle-of-the-road people. He brings hardcore conservative people to the table. I mean, look at who voted for him in New Hampshire. All of the things I just mentioned were people that voted for Donald Trump in New Hampshire.
The question is, can he, if you're going to talk electability, can he get beyond a certain plateau? I mean, the polls would seem to indicate that he, in matchups with Democrats, does not fare well either.
Let me just check. Let me see. Hillary Clinton is currently losing to an avowed socialist senator that's almost unknown. I suspect Donald Trump can beat her. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say if she can't beat that guy, handily, then she's got deeper problems as well.
I agree with you.
See.
Yeah, and I think you end up with Hillary, and I think you end up with Hillary being a very unlikable. The polls show it. The favorables are bad. People don't trust her. But you have to wonder what the Democrats, what will come up against Donald Trump, who's got a long history of being all over the map on positions. It would be a brutal campaign, and you can't assume electability on our side. I think just because he's made some appeal to moderates by taking moderate positions and then some conservative positions. It's a difficult scenario, I grant it, for the Republicans in terms of electability, but we do have better candidates. I mean, I think Cruz, at least, is consistent. I think Rubio is solid on economic issues. These guys could make a better case, but...
Wait, let me ask you this. I mean, you got 10 seconds. Would you choose Jeb Bush over Donald Trump?
If you go back to Jeb's record as governor, I would, yes. At least I know where he stands.
All right. Doug Sachtleben from the Club for Growth. Always a good conversation.
Steve, thanks.
There you have it. It's Thursday here on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right, it's Thursday. Welcome to it. All right. Take a break from politics for a minute. Well, sort of. Take a little different tack, if you will. Super Bowl ads are not what they used to be, in my estimation, although I did enjoy some of them this year. I don't understand that monkey thing, though. Still a little bit confused about that. But I did enjoy the ads. And, in fact, I really enjoyed the Doritos ad. But then apparently those people are in hot water because somehow it humanized a fetus. So NARAL, the pro-abortion group, is all down on Doritos for humanizing a fetus. Well, gee, what do you think it is anyway? I thought it was a cute ad, actually. And then, of course, the big outcry over the Beyonce thing. I didn't watch the halftime performance, so I didn't get to, I didn't get it, I suppose. But Christopher Harris here is the executive director of Unhyphenated America and why people are upset. Christopher, welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning, Steve.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Beyonce or you want to start with some snack food?
Well, can't we just watch football? Don't you miss the good old days where you just watch a football game and you had some high school marching band playing a John Phillips Sousa march, and then that was it. You got back to football. Oh, man,
Well, no, because you can't even watch that now because, now we're all worried about the football players getting injured, too. But that's a discussion for a different day. They're bringing them back.
Another time. But...
Yeah. Give me an idea here. Let's start with the Beyonce thing. I didn't see it, all right? So, and I saw all the uproar later, but I understand that people are going to boycott the Mets and so forth. That we're not coming there if you're going to associate with a woman that they now believe is anti-law enforcement and so forth. Tell me more.
Well, the interesting thing about that was Beyonce actually received a police escort as she was driving to the stadium. That whole thing, and let's just Beyonce is a opportunist, but she is very much the Marxist, because I always look at people like this. Beyonce and her husband, Sean Carter, Jay-Z, are best buds with the president and first lady. They exchange text messages. The first lady said, "Oh, I wish I were more like her." Like, hey, the first lady is a Princeton-educated, Harvard law-educated woman, and she's saying that her role model is Beyonce. We know the Obamas are Marxists, so, Marxists don't look up to non-Marxists. So I'm not surprised at all, but actually, I'm not upset at Beyonce as much as I am upset at the NFL for politicizing, for giving her the platform, the opportunity to politicize this. That, that this is, okay, it's the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party. You know what? Why are you highlighting that? I mean, I personally know the Black Panther Party at least started out in some ways to be not the evil thing that it turned into in many ways, that it had good intentions, and in some ways it was a militia group to protect black people from racist and police brutality, but it quickly lost its way.
It evolved into something different, yes.
Yeah, and then it became just another Marxist organization, as was, the 1960s, socialism and Marxism was on the march across the world, so it's not surprising that the organization quickly turned into another Marxist organization. But that withstanding, this was not the place for that. It just wasn't the place for that. And NFL officials who signed off on this, because, Steve, let's think about it like this. Do you think that she and her dancers, her buddies, do you think they were, backstage just before the show and said, hey, you know what? Skip all the training that we've done before. Let's turn this into we'll improvise and turn this into
let me ask you this.
Anti-cop thing. No, they practiced this.
Well, sure, but let me ask you this, Christopher. Do you think the NFL actually knew? I mean, let's be honest, in fairness. You got a bunch of old white guys back there. They're looking at this, and they're going, okay, whatever. It's a bunch of dancing and music and, not my thing. And, hey, it looks great, and the kids love it. Cool, see you later. That's how much thought probably went into that deal.
Very likely, but then I think there's been a little bit more scrutiny since the nip slip, as they called it, the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake thing.
Oh, yeah.
That they've tried to, there was so much outrage over that, and I think it cost them and the network millions of dollars, and so they've tried to be a lot more, they try to scrutinize a lot more and have it, the halftime show be more vanilla, which it was apart from her performance. So, yeah, that just, I have one of my Facebook friends, Patrick Hampton, has launched a Boycott Beyonce page, and it quickly gained 5,000
So it picked up speed pretty quick. All right, so where do you think it goes, though? I mean, it's the kind of thing that, the Americans, they lose focus. They lose their attention span just wanes. And
I was just about to say that it'll be hot for a minute, and then it'll cool off quickly.
Yeah, there you go. So, all right, let's move on to the other thing, the Doritos commercial there. And apparently, how dare Doritos humanize a fetus? I mean, it's not really a fetus. It's not really a person, right? I mean, so why would we humanize a fetus? I'm baffled a little bit.
Yeah, what is that organization, NARAL, or however they're pronounced?
NARAL, or however you say it, yeah.
Yeah, they're morons. I mean, really, they're not even worthy of the attention that we've given them, because the science alone says that at the moment of conception, you're a human being, that your unique DNA pattern has been formed at that moment of conception. So you're just a human being at the earliest stage of development while you're in your mother's womb. So the whole idea of them saying, "Oh, you're trying to humanize a fetus," no, you were human right away. I mean, it's just so
you must be popular.
Emotionalism, and really, we should just say you're a moron and sit down and be quiet.
Christopher Harris, the executive director of Unhyphenated America. You must be popular at Democratic get-togethers.
Oh, they love me.
Yeah, they must. I bet your email is a fascinating place to explore.
Yeah. I hear a lot of things behind my back, but not for long because I keep on moving, so they kind of stay behind me. Yeah,
it's hard to hit a moving target. So, Unhyphenated America, before we let you go here today, what is that? How can people read more and find out more about your unique perspective on the world?
Well, the website itself is www.unhyphenatedamerica.org. So it's unhyphenatedamerica.org. And we're exactly what we sound like. We believe that America's best when it's unhyphenated. When you understand and believe in the principles of America, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, when you really embrace those, you're an American, and there's no need for any prefix or suffix to add to that.
Teddy Roosevelt said that in 1915 in October of that year. I think he was right then. You're right today. And in a good conversation. Look forward to having you back on the program sometime soon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Steve. Have a good morning.
Christopher Harris, everybody, the executive director of Unhyphenated America, unhyphenatedamerica.org, the place to find it. This hour, the Steve Gruber Show is brought to you by the Michigan 529 programs, making sure your kids and grandkids get the education they need. To learn more, you can go with SaveWithMI529.com. That's SaveWithMI529.com. Now, remember, still to come, the governor will be here with me today. Governor Rick Snyder joining me here on the program. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
Traveling in a freighter combi.
All right, it's Thursday. You can go to the Steve Gruber Show Facebook page. Make sure you click like if you do that. And then pose a question for the governor who's upcoming here. We'll see if we get your question on the air. I'll give you credit, of course, if I use it. And just go to the Steve Gruber Show Facebook page. Click like, tell your friends, gather around, boys and girls. You might just learn something. Debbie Georgatos here, political strategist. For shifting gears until we get to the governor just for a moment here. Debbie Georgatos, political strategist, joining us again on the program. Debbie, welcome back. How have you been?
Very well. Good morning. Happy to be on with you.
Happy to be here. Let's talk about it. It's such a strange thing, this Donald Trump thing. Insofar as the people that he attracts, because I see him attracting Democrats, I see him attracting middle-of-the-road people, and I see him attracting hardcore conservatives, while at the same time, other hardcore conservatives, middle-of-the-road people, and Democrats say horrible things about the guy. It is really kind of an odd phenomenon.
It is. It's an odd political season because of Mr. Trump being in the race. I noticed even in the Iowa caucus that they were breaking down where his votes came from, and a lot were heavily union towns. They're talking about unions being worried that Donald Trump may pull a lot of voters who they just rely on to be consistent Democrat voters. So, yes, it's a wide, and I think it's a lot about personality, and it's a lot about anger. And I think justifiable anger really on both sides, just kind of frustrated with the condition of the country.
Well, I think he is going to pull a lot of a union vote because He has done so much work with unions, building buildings in places like New York. He always worked with the unions. He never dodged the unions. And so, therefore, you get the union support. And let's be honest, a lot of these unions are sitting on the sidelines right now waiting to endorse him, if you believe what's being written in some of the New York papers.
Wow. Well, I think it would be a great thing. This may be a year also where we just kind of get rid of all this identity politics and certain candidates or people thinking they own entire segments of workers or segments of voters. I love the idea that union members would look at what is being said by the Republican, what's being said by the Democrat, and vote what they believe in. I think that's just a fabulous thing. And even on the Democrat side, Hillary is losing a lot of the identity politic type voters whom she's usually been able to count on.
Yeah,
it's
Madeleine
a really
Albright.
Interesting season.
Madeleine Albright did Hillary Clinton no favors by going out there in effect saying that there's a special place in hell for women that don't vote for Hillary because they're not voting for another woman. I'm like, really? You see, here's the thing that that Madeleine Albright and Hillary and a lot of the leftists just don't get, which is the fact that women like people with ideas, too. It's not just about, their plumbing. Last I checked, it's about ideas and moving the country forward and jobs and national security and defense. I mean, these things, women care about these things, too, don't they, Debbie?
They sure do. My radio show is called Ladies Can We Talk, and I'm constantly hitting on this. Every issue matters to women, and we are actually smart enough to analyze all these issues, figure out what we believe in, and vote for those things. And Madeleine Albright's comment was among the worst, but there have been other ones by the head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, about kind of our party's a natural home for women. Why?
Yeah, she's quite a peach. Yeah, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's a peach too. She'd have been run out of her job by most standards after the 2014 debacle for the Democrats, and somehow she retained her position for gross underachievement in office, I guess.
Very true. On the subject of the primaries, if we may, on New Hampshire for a moment, Hillary Clinton, which is just an astounding thing, she did not. The only demographic she did win in the New Hampshire primary, she won the over 65 vote. And in my view, those are people who remember the Bill Clinton years and think this is going to be repeated, and those who have a family income of $200,000 or more. So the demographic of women and young people and students, they all went with Bernie Sanders. This is a real. I don't think Bernie Sanders will continue to win primaries as the Democrats move forward. But this is a real pickle for Hillary Clinton to define what does she stand for if she can't have this identity politics, kind of group vote block that she has relied on throughout her life.
And the other funny thing, and back to this Trump phenomenon and comparing it to Hillary here. Well, Donald Trump, first of all, they've been telling us since June of last year that he couldn't possibly win, they being all the pundits. I was not on that group, by the way, saying it was not possible for him to get the Republican nomination. I said from the beginning, he is somebody to be taken seriously. I was right about that. I also said John Kasich was an interesting candidate to watch in the long run. I was right about that. Here's the problem that Hillary faces now. You've got people saying, well, Donald Trump certainly couldn't win a general election, a national election. Now, bear in mind, these are the same people that have been telling you his campaign would collapse since last June. Every 2 weeks they're telling you this. So they have zero credibility. And the fact of the matter is Hillary Clinton is currently losing to a 74-year-old curmudgeon socialist, a guy who thinks that General Motors ought to be owned by the government. She's losing to this guy, a nobody senator from a nowhere state, a little tiny state of Vermont. And you're telling me, well, Donald Trump can't beat her. If Bernie Sanders can beat her, I can guarantee you Donald Trump can tune her like a fiddle.
I could not agree more. I have said from the start, I think almost every candidate on the GOP side could have beaten Hillary Clinton. And it is in part because she is just a painful campaigner. She doesn't inspire enthusiasm. She can't build crowds. And the other truth is, when people start really examining her life story, her history, her conduct in her life, young voters who didn't live through the Clinton era, they're thinking, I don't think so. I actually think numerous people on the GOP side could beat Hillary, including, I agree with you, that Donald Trump could.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders took 70% of the vote, not under 30, under 50. He took 70% of the people under 50. Donald Trump in some polls is attracting 25% of the black vote. 25% of the black vote. Think about that. Oh, that could never happen. Trust me, it can happen. Anyhow, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I think it is a season for everyone, your listeners and everyone, to really listen to what the candidates are saying. I love eliminating all the identity politics because this is a very, very important election. The majority of Americans see that this country's on the wrong track. Figuring out who can get back on the right track is the most important thing that we can be doing, and really listening not to just big personality, but the substance of what they're saying. It's a big year for America.
Debbie, thank you so much.
Great talking to you.
Debbie Georgatos, political strategist here on the program. Hey, and for Valentine's Day, check out wheatjewelers.com. Wheatjewelers.com for something special this Valentine's Day.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
My homework is
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, Thursday here on the program, and appreciate your support. A lot of things changing here on the political scene, almost at breakneck speed. The Democratic Black Caucus racing to Hillary Clinton's aid should be endorsing her today. They're deeply concerned about the collapse of her campaign in the last few weeks. You know, she had like a 30-point lead or more in New Hampshire at one point. Then she gets crushed, 22 points by a geezer, frankly, who is a Democratic socialist. An old Democratic socialist. Now the Republicans are wanting to know if Trump and Cruz can be stopped. So the Republicans are concerned about who their nominees are, or could potentially be. The Democrats, and this is interesting, the Democrats are fighting to keep Hillary viable. At the same time that we have just learned that a lot of her emails were accessible by a whole pile of her aides. A whole pile of her top aides were able to handle those classified emails, including Cheryl Mills, Huma Abedin, Jake Sullivan, Philip Raines, and others, including Patrick Kennedy, a whole host of others. Hillary Clinton's this is the slow bleed of Hillary. It continues. All right, so coming up here in a little bit, we'll have the governor with us. We're going to talk about his new budget, $55 billion. And, of course, we're going to talk about the ongoing crisis problem in Flint. And I can assure you that he's in a position where nobody's happy right now. The people in Flint are accusing him of all sorts of impropriety, in as much as including in poisoning children there because they're poor and black, just to save some money. That's how reprehensible this conversation has gotten. And on the other side, he's earmarked almost $250 million to address the issues in Flint, which has other people on the other side of the aisle up in arms going, how are we spending all of that money? All right. So we set the stage for all that still to come. But right now we have Congressman Tim Walberg, as we always do on Thursdays, or generally do. Congressman Walberg, welcome back to the program.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
It is the silly season in politics, for sure, now that we've gone through New Hampshire. Let's start with that just for a little bit of a warm-up here. Chris Christie has dropped out. Carly Fiorina has dropped out. The field is finally getting to the point where it's, I suppose, manageable. I think there are 5 viable candidates left on the Republican side, which would be Trump and Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, and, of course, Ohio Governor John Kasich, who came in second place in New Hampshire. What do you make of the field that's left?
Well, it's a strong field. It's a field that I think you'll see some gravitating toward one or the other. Trump remains at the top, and I think that's something that wasn't expected initially. It shows the upheaval that is out there, that people are looking for other options, and frankly, the primary process is for that. Just remains to be seen now what will happen with, say, Christie's people that supported him, Fiorina's, and others that will now gravitate toward other candidates. The people, in the end, decide, and I'm watching as much as anybody else.
One of the things that has been coming up recently, and I'll ask you, and refresh our memory, if you would, when it came to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that trade arrangement, if you will, did you come down for or against that proposal?
There's been no vote on it yet. TPP is still hanging out there. The president hasn't brought it to us yet, so the 90-day look-at period hasn't even started as according to law that was put in place under TPA, the arrangement that established how we deal with trade agreements, including TPP down the road. That's a process in TPP, specifically 5,000 pages to take a look at, and it's on my website, so a link to it, at least, so people, if they'd like to look at it themselves and draw their own opinions on what this trade partnership agreement would be, they can do that.
And let me rephrase the question: are you for or against that the TPP?
Haven't made up my mind on it yet. We're still, my staff and I are looking at it. We want to be prepared when and if the president does bring it to us to make a decision here in Congress, because ultimately we will have to take a vote on it. And it's a process that I think has to be looked at in context of two things. One, there are going to be trade agreements going on in Asia, in Europe, that we will be part of or we won't be part of. If we're not part of, then countries like China, Japan will lead the way on deciding how those trade agreements work. If we're part of it, we will have a major portion of responsibility in deciding what that's going to look like. I certainly would want that, but in the end, if the trade agreement isn't right, you've got to vote against it.
Well, the reason I bring this up, Donald Trump, one of the leading contenders we just talked about for Republican nomination, maybe, is still leading by just leading nationally, period, and just came off a huge victory in New Hampshire, should have another big win in South Carolina, I'm guessing. Very much opposed to it, says it'll cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs. Do you believe that he might be accurate about that?
Well, that's a case he'll have to point out. So far, we haven't seen the trade agreements that have been functioning as costing American jobs in the net result. In fact, we've seen trade agreements bring in more good-paying, higher technology, et cetera, jobs as a result of gaining control of the process. There will be jobs always lost in trade agreements. In our case, we want to make sure it's the lower-level jobs that aren't here for the long road anyway. As we grow in our economy, as we grow in our technology, our capabilities, we want to always expand the opportunities and produce higher-paying jobs for people to choose in our country, and that's been the challenge in these last number of years with a very sluggish economy as a result of terrible policy here in Washington, led by an administration that seems to want to go away from what makes America work and what makes Americans happy.
How do we go back to
growth and opportunity?
How do we go back to honest U6 numbers? Now, this might be Japanese to some people, but through the middle part of the Bill Clinton administration, U6 was the number used for unemployment, for example, and now we use the U3 number. And the U6 numbers currently are at about 10% unemployment in America, which is a lot more reflective of the truth. We got about 20 seconds here before we take a break. But what do you think? Should we go back to more accurate numbers?
Oh, absolutely. We have to go back to accuracy if we know what's taking place and what to do about it. And that means a new president that's willing to function under what made America work. That's its Constitution, that's its free market, free enterprise approach, and letting the people grow the economy from the ground up as opposed to top-down management.
Hold your thought right there. We're with Congressman Tim Walberg on the program today. We'll be back in just a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
In the shuffling madness of the locomotive breath.
All right, welcome back to it. You know, you start talking about these economic numbers. The reason this is important, you see, when we use U6 numbers and you looked at the unemployment rate, if you were watching Walter Cronkite back in the day or whatever, or Dan rather, whoever you might have watched back then, you see an unemployment a number of 5 or 6 or 7% or whatever it might have been. But see, that was when they all used the U6 number, which includes underemployed, you know, and other categories to come to this total number of people that are not fully employed, because right now we have something on the order of 95 million Americans of working age that are not participating in the workforce, and yet they want us to believe that the unemployment rate is 4.9%. It's hogwash. It's garbage. You know it, and so do I. So we need to, you know, use real numbers, because they went to the U3 numbers. During Bill Clinton's administration, they stopped using U6 numbers, went to U3 numbers, which is always a much smaller number, because right now it's 4.9%. The U6 number, the true unemployment rate in America is 9.9%. And if people knew the unemployment rate was 9.9%, or knew what the true number was, say in 2012, the election may likely have gone the other way. That's why, you know, being honest about these things is important. Congressman Tim Walberg on the line with us this morning. And Congressman, I want to switch to a couple of other things. Let's talk about North Korea launching a rocket that apparently put a satellite into orbit that cruised past the Super Bowl during the celebration right after the game. What do you make of that?
Well, it's another example of what happens when America loses its credibility as a strong, positive force in the world that is willing to stand up and say no and mean exactly that. North Korea doesn't respect us. They've seen our leader equivocate in many cases, make a few statements, and very few, but then not back them up either. So they will keep pushing. They'll keep pushing to enrich uranium, to have the necessary capabilities to very close now to create nuclear weapons, and having missiles and capabilities of moving them toward the United States exactly where they want to go. And you add Iran to that, along with Russia, continually rattling our cage with no real response coming from this administration. That causes problems, and it causes problems not only in the United States but around the world. Instability reigns. And
I bring that to your attention to lead into the next issue, which is American sailors on their knees being paraded down streets in Iran after they were captured here a few weeks ago and released a day or two later. But apparently there's video now of them being paraded on their knees with their hands behind their heads through the streets of Iran. The country we just made a deal with, similar to the deal we made with North Korea back in the mid-1990s.
Well, absolutely, and a deal that was opposed by the U.S. House of Representatives with resolution passed by the House and sent to the Senate, and no debate on it. The President hasn't pushed for that debate to take place. The law required that we approve of his plan. The House disapproved of it. We continue, and now have continued looking at court action on that very issue. The President is going off rogue, as it were. It's something that we've become accustomed to in this country, sadly, and it's something that has to change. And I think that's, again, why some of the top in the field of Republican candidates are people that are speaking very strongly and positively about the strength of America that has to be restored for us to gain control again of freedom and opportunity, not only in the United States but in the world.
So here we are, though, where we're looking at, in 1994, I believe it was, President Bill Clinton told us that his deal with North Korea would mean that, we're on a road to them joining the world of nations again, something to that ilk. And instead, here we are 20 years hence, and we've got a Korean nation that's launching satellites, and by some estimations now might have the capability of reaching the United States with a nuclear missile. And we're doing the same damn thing with Iran, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. We're not learning from history. Remember when Carter was in office and Iran was rattling its sabers and holding our people hostage, and Ronald Reagan spoke very clearly very strongly. And the day he was elected, we saw captives released. That came from power of principle and resolve to do the right thing, and America's first. We need that again. You only need to go on the website and take a look at the satellite picture of South Korea and North Korea at night, and you see one light bulb showing basically in North Korea and light all around in South Korea where people have some freedom. North Korea has denuded its countryside, has raped and pillaged its citizens in the sense of taking access to freedom and opportunity away from them in order to raise up a huge military and fighting force and now capabilities that ought to be causing our country, and especially this administration, to step back and say, wait a second, this can't go on, and we won't allow it, and we'll do what's necessary to make sure the world understands. That isn't the case. We have 12 months, basically, to get through here. And a lot of pushback, a lot of blocking and tackling will have to be done. But the American people, in the end, will have to decide, is America going to be the land of the free, the home of the brave, and the beacon for the world? Or are we going to waltz back, sadly, into obscurity of a nation that once was great and now isn't?
Well, we certainly hope not.
I would vote on the first.
All right. Congressman Tim Walberg, a good conversation. We will talk soon.
Look forward to it. Let's keep pushing forward.
There you have it, Congressman Tim Walberg, everybody, Republican from the 7th District here in Michigan. Still to come, the governor will be here. The governor will be here to talk about his brand new budget just unveiled and how much money is on its way to Flint. A lot to talk about with the governor straight ahead here on the program. And for Valentine's Day, don't forget about Wheat Jewelers. Something special, something Spartan. Great Spartan jewelry. Maybe that's a great Valentine gift. Check it out, wheatjewelers.com. You know what I need? I need to sit down for about an hour. You know, all of these politicians, make no mistake, and Governor Rick Snyder is no different. They all have people that insulate them against people like me. You know, I'm a harmless guy. I'm just here to have a friendly conversation, and you know, they're insulated. I mean, people like Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow, they won't come within 100 feet of my studio, 100 yards. I mean, they just avoid me. You know, I'm like, you know, Stabenow repellent and Gary Peters repellent. I mean, guys, come on in. We can have a conversation. We're not going to agree on everything. But if you're a United States Senator, shouldn't you step up and have a conversation? Nobody's under more pressure than Rick Snyder right now. Nobody's under more pressure, you know, than Rick Snyder. You know, he's the focus of, you know, hateful rhetoric all over the country. And if he'll stand in and take some questions, you'd think that a sitting U.S. Senator elected by the people of Michigan, that those folks would have the courage to step up. Dan Kildee comes in here, usually. He seems to have become a little bit scarce since he's been calling for the governor to resign, too. He's become a bit scarce, Congressman Kildee. But we're going to get him on here. I mean, he was easy to find when he wanted to talk about Amir Hekmati. He was really easy to find then. So, Congressman Kildee, don't be shy, you know, and don't just show up when you want to talk about something. Sometimes we have tough questions on this side, too. You know, so let's be honest. And, yeah, Sean, I'll get you that autograph sometime real soon, little buddy. Or should I say little brother? All right, yeah, you liked that, didn't you? This hour of the Steve Gruber Show has been brought to you by the Michigan 529 programs, making sure your kids and grandkids get the education they need. To learn more, go to SaveWithMI529.com. SaveWithMI529.com. Get an education. You know, go out there and be somebody. Great program again today. I appreciate your support. Of course, tomorrow's Free for All Friday. We can sort it all out. You and I have a conversation about it. Get on the same page. We can get Antonio on the air and Sean on the air. We'll have a big old Friday. Maybe even Ivy will join us. Need a woman's perspective. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Have a great day.